Warm welcome to this special episode of ETGovernment's Good Governance and Better Security Leadership Series. My name is Anoop Verma. Today, our guest for this special interview is Lieutenant General Raj Shukla. In the 4 decades that he has served in the Indian Army, he has seen extensive service in the field. He commanded an infantry brigade in counter-insurgency operations, the Baramulla Division along the line of control in Kashmir Valley, and a private corps in the western borders. Since July 2022, he has held the office of member, Union Public Service Commission, UPSC. The topic of today's conversation with Lieutenant General Shukla is the complicated geopolitical situation that India faces due to China's rise as a global economic and military power. What can India do to counter that China and safeguard its own geopolitical and economic interests? Welcome, Lieutenant General Shukla.
So thank you, Anoopji. Great pleasure. Great pleasure. And thank you so much for calling me on your show.
China is a major world power of the 21st century. It dominates the world through its economic as well as military power. So what can India do to counter the superpower like China in Asia, especially in the South Asian countries and the Indian Ocean region where much of our economic and geopolitical interests are based?
So India is doing what it can, what it must. Yes. But, China in its current form is such a phenomena that, and the challenge is so enormous that we need to, look at it afresh, understand this whole phenomena of Chinese power. There was I think a British General John Hackett, जिन्होंने कहा था that before you proceed to change the world, you must have the humility to understand. So 2-3 minutes में लगाऊंगा to explain what this Chinese power is all about. You see, there are 2 aspects of Chinese power which we need to understand. One is the long-term outlook, and second is the resolute action. अब दोनों बातों पे थोड़ी सी चर्चा करते हैं so that we understand. See, what is the root of Chinese power? The root of Chinese power is the strategy of its 100-year marathon. 100-year marathon. It starts sometime in 1940s. और देखिए, I'll give you some examples which are mind-boggling. 1949 or so, Mao writes to Washington, Chairman Mao, and this is recorded by a journalist called John Pigler. And he appeals to Washington. He says, China needs to industrialize. We need to adapt your free market. This is Mao saying it. Give us your technology. We need some money. A decade later, Chou En-lai follows it up and says, we are not communists. Communism is an interim phase. We are like you. We will become like you. Trying to entice the Americans. फिर वो बड़ी मुश्किलों में फंस जाते हैं, cultural revolution, this, that, but they don't give it up. 100-year marathon is कि in 100 years we will beat USA. And this, there is no written strategy. It is, I think Michael Pillsbury says, it is stuck into a Chinese wallet. But all the, the power elite in China, their top bureaucrats, soldiers, Communist Party members, Politburo members, when they pass through Chinese think tanks in the Tsinghua University or in the CCP, the 100-year marathon is drilled into them. So आगे चलिए जब वो Deng का समय आता है, you will recall he said, we must bide our time, hide and bide. अब West ने उसको interpret किया that he's saying, all right, we will hide our capacities, bide our time. But the Chinese translation is different. The Chinese translation of hide and bide is that don't clash with your hegemon prematurely. Wait for your power to grow. When your power grows, overthrow him ruthlessly. Now, देखिए, what is the normal understanding and the actual understanding? When the Chinese talk of the Middle Kingdom, उसका अर्थ ये है heavens above We are the Middle Kingdom and the rest are the barbarians. The barbarians have to be civilized. When they talk of the China dream, it is a unipolar world dominated by China. So if this is it, they have taken 100 years to gradually build their capacities. And it so has happened that many things have clicked. 1980 में Deng says, so what if the Middle East has oil? We have rare earths. Look, in rare earths processing, they are number one. अब ये जो 100 साल वाली कहानी है, in democracies where governments change every 5 years, ये करना ही मुश्किल है. So now when Chinese power overwhelms us and we get surprised, not only us, much of the West, we get surprised because we are not made like them. अब मैं आपको 2-3 आंकड़े देता हूं, which will tell you how powerful they are. Not that they cannot be handled, but we must first admit how powerful they are or how powerful they have become. R&D में total civil military सब R&D में today USA spends $950 billion. China जो किसी समय $30 million भी नहीं करता था, it is spending $550 billion. Look at the comp. Why is the US getting scared? Chips Act वगैरह. Because वो R&D में इतना खर्च कर पा रहे हैं. भारत कितना खर्च कर रहा है? $2 billion. 950, 550, 2. I will emphasize to your viewers. तो इनका कहीं ना कहीं तो असर होगा. एक मैं आपको मिसाल देता हूं, which I have read about it last week. It is mind-boggling. 10 years back, every 10 years, their CCP, their technology unit of the Politburo, takes a look at one technology just पे मारता up. They have to achieve complete supremacy. So which is that technology they pick up? 10 years back, they decide that it is going to be batteries. Now see what do they do? उसकी वो research करते हैं. Battery chemistry, battery metallurgy. It is the only country which runs 50 courses, exclusive courses on batteries. If I tell my son कि आप battery पे course कर लो, वो बोलेगा, are you in your senses? 50 courses battery पे, metallurgy, 50 chemistry पे. And they do PSC, MSc, PhD in batteries. So they have created a whole generation of people who have mastered batteries. Now when the Americans have woken up, they realize कि भाई अगर हम शुरू भी करते हैं batteries, our cost is 6 times those of the Chinese. They have got a whole university looking at batteries. So are we surprised now that in electric vehicles, they have kicked out the massive Germans in the auto market? Acha. They don't believe in civil military separation. जैसे हम कहते हैं ना civil military. You will wonder, is Huawei a communication company or is it military? Both. हमारे यहाँ Reliance civil करेगा, कोई military करेगा. अब you may not agree with their philosophy, but it is working. As a result of which today, look at their EVs are doing so well that the Americans and the Europeans have no option but to 100% tariffs. और बैटरी का इस्तेमाल स्पेस में भी होता है, मिलिट्री में भी होता है. एक एडी वेपन सिस्टम हमारे यहाँ, we have 5 vehicles to carry generators because we have no mastery on batteries. They have miniaturized the batteries. पिछले हफ्ते एक ऑस्ट्रेलियन एक ट्रैकर है, टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रैकर. That tracker has come out. It tells us that in chips, the advanced chips are still with the Americans, but in the mid and low ranges, 70% of the market is Chinese. We have just started a semiconductor mission of 6,000 crores. In rare earths, again, 70% of the market. In batteries, it is 90% of the market. In the emerging technology field, out of 44 technologies and their subsets in 37, who leads? Not USA, China. पिछले साल 65 पेपर लिखे गए on high impact research, hypersonics, aircraft engines, robotics, military autonomy. Global में अगर 65 पेपर लिखे गए हैं, 52 are now coming from China. 52. Or, there's an American journalist who wrote a book, The Bubble That Never Pops. In democracies, we are constantly predicting China's decline. It may be possible. I'm not saying कि नहीं होगा. भाई आज मरेगा, कल मरेगा. He says it is the bubble never pops. And see, what should now the serious point is what is the reality? We are a latent power. We are a power in the making. A lot of things are in our. But today, on our borders, we have a superpower threat. $2 billion, $550 billion. Hakikat ye hai. So this is what makes the challenge. So it is not, ki they are doing something, we are doing something. So if we do some, thoda bahut hum kar lenge to. The problem is their sheer power in all this. Now the West has slept, we have slept, very frankly. There are opportunities for us in Amritkal, as we all know. A lot of things can go right, but there is that lurking danger. मैं आपको दो तीन मिसाल देता हूँ. 2017, I went for a conference at IPAC, Indo-Pacific Army Chiefs Conference. So these Americans, the whole day, were lecturing, all of us, and China wala bhi baitha tha general, on open access, 12 nautical miles, freedom of the seas. और हम सब सुन रहे थे. This is the American narrative. Sham ko that Chinese general comes to me and says, what do you think, General, of this open seas? मैंने कहा, absolutely right. Open seas होना चाहिए, 12 nautical miles. He says, now look at him. He says, when a power has 40 bases around you, he's referring to the Americans, or every day they send a ship to 12 nautical miles, is it military coercion or is it 12 nautical miles? And then he says, hubris now. He says, don't worry, by 2035, the question will not be whether American ships stay 12 nautical miles of Shanghai. The question will be whether Chinese ships stay 12 nautical miles of California. And is it happening now? 400 ship navy, larger than the USA. I mean, sometimes you read these figures, they are mind-boggling. Shipbuilding capacity 200 times that of the USA. They are building 12 destroyers a year. India builds 1 destroyer in 3 years. So ये सब चीजें हैं. 1995 में China acted funny over Taiwan. Bill Clinton dispatched 2 aircraft carriers. That was American power. China एकदम पीछे हो गया. Today, Admiral Paparo is talking of hellscape. मतलब कि Chinese A2AD is so formidable that we cannot send manned ships. They all have to be unmanned. So, it is a superpower now, which when you say, what can we do? Well, we must do what we are doing, but with extraordinary responses, space, scale. अच्छा देखिए अब ये रुक नहीं रही है ये बात. AI देखिए. AI is now the future. Look at their philosophy on it. They are saying, in the civil domain, we will regulate AI. And all knowledgeable observers say that their AI regulations in the civil space are stronger than the EU and America. But the Chinese say that in the strategic military domain, it will be freewheeling, national security interest. हमारे यहाँ क्या होगा in a democracy? Precisely the opposite. This year, when their economy is tottering, some say 3%, some say 4%, koi kehta hai 2%, koi kehta hai half. They have increased their defense budget by 7.2%. So, if defense is to be secured, they will pull the money out. Their SOEs, जिसे कहते हैं, state-owned enterprises like our PSUs, defense PUCs, were as inefficient. They carried out reform. 30 million workers were sacked. Can we do it in our country? So, there are no real answers. But this is the nature of Chinese power. It has to be grappled with. So we are doing what we must. All I can say is if we understand this threat, then we will not say, bhai, DPP badli nahi ho sakti, GFR ka ye chakkar hai. Arey bhai, aapne kuch karna hai. Aur nahi karna hai, so that is the reality. So I sometimes think when we say DRDO says, no, we will not reform in this manner, they are saying it because they don't understand this Chinese juggernaut. If we understand this Chinese juggernaut, we will say, bhai, ye bhi karenge, wo bhi karenge. And if we do that, then we cannot match them, yuan for rupee, but we can do a lot. So मैं तो कहता हूँ, the first thing is, bhai, please, बड़ी नम्रता से acknowledge the Chinese power or counter this data sets that I'm giving. And so what has happened is, on a lighter note, when democracies were wasting their time on values and freedoms, not wasting, maybe good, China was focused on accumulating and aggregating power. They have done it. So that is my answer, long answer to your short question. And therefore, the challenge is actually sophisticated. We really need to act with it in speed, scale, resolve.
But as you said, it's not possible for a democracy. And that's probably true. In a democratic country, progress is very difficult because there are all kinds of arguments from all sides.
So here you have raised a very valid question. Why? I can understand in implementation. Why in ideation? भाई thought में तो हम आगे होने चाहिए. When somebody had said, closed society, open minds. Open society, closed minds.
Yes, that's true.
So I can understand in implementation. Why in thought? We wake up 10 years after China has done a thing. That is something that should look what is, and it's not only us. America is stunned.
But America is also a democracy now, very noisy democracy since 1960.
Yes, but Americans used to say, because we are a democracy, we innovate better than the Chinese. And it was a fact because of the university system, open system.
I think that much of the innovation that America has done happened before 1960. After 1960, they are actually slowing down, except for the field of software.
Exactly. No, I mean, say the military is still not a write-off. Okay, so let's take one. I'll give you one piece of statistics. Despite all that I have said, the global GDP 65% still comes from the West. Military expenditure 75% is still from the West. The ideation agenda setting 95% UN multilateral.
I think that might be due to their currency power.
Oh,
so
yes.
The currency.
Yeah. So the Americans also are saying, wake up. Now, if the Americans need to wake up, we need to wake up even more. जो हम गलती ये करते हैं कि भाई because they are an autocracy, everything else of theirs is bogus. That's not true. They are innovative. They are a meritocracy. President Xi has got admission into the Chinese Communist Party in his 11th attempt. 10 times he was rejected. If you want to get admission to the Chinese Communist Party in China, which is the ticket to prosperity, much like, getting entry into the civil service here, which, raises your, what shall I say, gives you a steady career, this, that. And if you're a girl, you have to be in the first two of the high school exam every year. Only 2 girls get in. So meritocracy है. हमने क्या गलती की कुछ 10-15 सालों से कि यार they are communist, autocratic, so they can never do stuff like us. And they were actually hiding and biding. जब ये कर रहे थे तो चुपचाप थे. Of late they have gone loud and proud. There is a Chinese word for it, I don't understand. कि भाई अब हम आ गए हैं. Now you please go back to the 100-year marathon. How smart. Mao was begging. फिर Deng साहब कहते हैं hide and bide. Now Xi has said loud and proud. But it is a 100-year marathon.
Yes.
हमारे यहाँ 5 साल का plan बनाना मुश्किल है.
I think one important point that you have made is that they have a long-term vision.
Very long.
100-year marathon that they are playing. Similarly, the Modi government has now come up with a Viksit Bharat program.
Yeah.
Which at least it's not a 100-year program, but it's a 25-year program.
Exactly.
Earlier, we were just planning for 5 years, 5-year plan. Now it's a 25-year-old plan.
Absolutely.
I think we have made a slight improvement in that direction.
Oh, great improvement. Like now, let's say, under the Modi government, the field that I know, national security, we are undergoing the most massive reform since independence. The boldest reform since independence. There is CDS creation, defense coming out of the shadows of foreign policy, DRDO reform, OFB reform. But the fact is, what I outlined about China, we are reforming, he is racing. So we have to race ahead. So I'm saying we have done a lot, but when we have to be honest, when it comes to the enormity of the China challenge, it is great. अच्छा साथ में क्या हुआ है? एक और चीज हो गई. ये सबको यूक्रेन में पता लगा. And I'm now quoting, General Mark Milley, the American, just recently retired chairman, Joint Chiefs. He says that Ukraine has shown us the most profound changes, most fundamental changes in the character of wars in recorded history. Recorded history. So now, अब हमको 2 चीजों से जूझना है. एक तो चाइना और दूसरा ये जो character of war में टेक्नोलॉजी वगैरह से चेंज हो रही. Now, this is the enormity of the challenge. And we have done a lot. अब देखिए हमारे यहाँ प्रॉब्लम क्या होता है, इवन व्हेन से वी से अमृत काल, अगर हम कहते हैं भाई 2047 तक विश्व बंधु बनना है, उस पर डिबेट शुरू हो जाती है। व्हाट इज विश्व बंधु, वाई अमृत काल, इफ पीपल आर अंडर पॉवर्टी व्हाट आर यू टॉकिंग। तो मैं कहता हूं भाई पीपल आर अंडर पॉवर्टी, दैट मस्ट बी हैंडल्ड, व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम इन बेंच सेटिंग, उसमें क्या, वेयर इज द कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन। एंड व्हेन द चाइनीज से 100-year मैराथन, हम ताली बजाते हैं, सी हाउ लॉन्ग टर्म दे थिंक। When it comes to our own, you see there is a problem with even saying that we will look 25 years hence. So forget long-term thinking, even saying it, and we know it. There are intellectuals who start opposing it. So I'm saying, of course, you have to be inclusive. You have to take care of poverty. But what is the harm in bench setting, in setting some goals?
I think it would be very difficult in India to go the, especially in the defense manufacturing sector and every other sector for that instance.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as you come to your questions, we'll discuss. So there is a problem. It can be done, but we have to do all these things. Hasten our reform, speed and scale of placing orders. We must realize, as I said, we are a blatant power, but there is a superpower on our borders. China is not tucked away in Latin America. Problem हमारी ये. Now this realization, if we realize, then there will be civil military fusion. हम तो यहाँ अभी साइलोज में फंसे हुए हैं, प्राइवेट गवर्नमेंट, झगड़े हमारे यही हैं, सिविल मिलिट्री. लुक हाउ दे आर सो स्मार्ट अबाउट. If we go back to our own roots, our civilizational wisdom said Saraswati, Lakshmi और दुर्गा का समावेश, which was so wonderful. Use your academia to produce talent, produce technology, use that wealth, Lakshmi, to nurse instruments of power. But we have got into these silos. In fact, the fact that we have copied Western thinking is regressive. We have got into the civil silo, military silo, private sector, government. So they don't talk of this, they talk of military-civil fusion. So, a lot of the structural changes are needed, cultural changes are needed, speed is needed, scale is needed. For example, let's take DRDO. If we see what honestly China is doing, the DRDO chief himself should say we must reform. Why should the government force reform? अगर हम उसको समझेंगे कि भाई क्या हो रहा है. And the other question is not only should you reform, why didn't you study the Chinese and what was happening? I mean, all of us are guilty in that. अभी हमको पता लग रहा है जब when we see the outcomes कि अरे चाइना ने ये कर दिया, चाइना ने वो कर दिया.
And it is so surprising, China's rise, because till 1980, China was actually behind India.
Absolutely.
Not just economically, but also in social factors.
And now there are some very difficult choices. 1962, our GDP was as much as China. Our per capita GDP was higher than China.
Yes, higher.
We took the call. We said, no, let us grow. Then we will spend on defense. See what happened. And our economy was put back by. So I'm just telling you how difficult these choices are. And for somebody in government, it's not easy to make these choices. We have to find the money now. Whatever our problems are, we have to find the money. And now these things have to be debated. And some very intelligent decisions have to be made.
Now, India is facing China in basically two places. One is the northern border, second is the Indian Ocean region, where China has become very active and it has become a very powerful force there. It has bases in most of the major countries and very good relationship with them due to its economic power, building ports in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and other infrastructure in other countries. So, and Indian Ocean region is the lifeline for India. Much of India's trade happens through this region. So what can India do to, secure this its influence in this Indian Ocean region? Should we align more with Australia and some other countries and form a common, some kind of alliance against China?
You see, let's look at it like this. जो हमारे threats हैं, one is, you very rightly identified them. One is through the, जिसे हम कहते हैं Western Theatre Command, northern borders. One is the developing threat through the IOR. You're right. If it's a 400-ship navy, it's not going to patrol the Chinese coast. Once they break out of the first island chain, Taiwan, IOR में आना है. In fact, in the IOR, their presence is already 75 to 80 days. It is already a fact. And they are now getting bases not only in Djibouti, but Atlantic. The BRI and this global PLA, ये सब हो रहा है. तो हमारी जो challenges हैं, one is of course territorial combat, LAC, LC. And now, may I also suggest to you, we can't neglect our western horizons. Pakistan is down for a while, but those western horizons are equally worrisome. देखिए JNK में क्या हो रहा है. So we cannot left our guard down anywhere. On top of that, it is not only WTC, Cs and this, there are these emerging domains, space, cyber, AI, and we will discuss. These are huge challenges. So what should India do? By and large, LAC, LC, we are okay. We need to reinforce. Our weaknesses are in strategic deterrence and power projection. So strategic deterrence, आप देखिए 14th April को, what saved the Israelis? Iron Dome, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, American Aegis destroyers, the whole America's Missile Defense Agency, which has got a global presence, and in space, UK fighters, US fighters. The Chinese rocket force is 4 times more sophisticated than Iran and Hamas and all that. We have got these problems. So we need a very strong AD system. We need to invest in drones, missiles. जैसे आपने कहा, if we don't project power across Malacca and meet the Chinese there, we will meet the Chinese threat on our coastline. Now, power projection has to be done across the 3 domains. We also need, just the Chinese have made an A2AD in the first island chain. We need a very strong A2AD in the IOR so that if the Chinese Navy comes, we can take them on. This, and the countries in the region, they will do what they have to. They will play both sides. They will also shift to the side which has greater power. That is human nature. That is the nature of international relations. So we have to create our own power. And what we can do, one is these capacities, and also simultaneously increase the footprint of our military diplomacy. Whatever we can do to prevent these ports from growing, whatever, aid we can give them so that they don't go into the Chinese lap. And that is the whole logic of theater commanders. The theater commanders will also have a quasi-diplomatic visage. For example, Western theater commander looks not only at the Indian border, he looks at the BRI to Europe. So our Western theater commander will also have to look at the threats beyond Pakistan, Taliban, Iran. It's not really a threat, but it's emerging power. Turkey, which is rewriting the geopolitics of Eurasia. The linkages between China, Taliban, Iran, the threats are assuming various shapes and forms. So I couldn't agree with you more that these are these threats and they have to be grappled with.
Yeah. How does India's border infrastructure compare with China's infrastructure? Because in last 10, 15 years, especially after coming of Modi government, a lot of investments have been made in the border areas. Border organization and other organizations are doing a lot of work there.
Before we come to the borders, just let's spend 2 minutes on the manufacturing. उसकी जिक्र आपने वो सवाल उठाया था, फिर वो
yes,
we lost it. So
yes,
you see, look at the linkages between your military industrial complex and your base manufacturing capacities. I'm told in 2014, Chinese manufacturing value added was half of that of the Americans. Half. Last year, it has become twice Chinese manufacturing. In consequence, China's military industrial complex, by American admissions, American studies, is 5 to 6 times more efficient than USA. Can you believe it? This mighty USA, which spends $950 billion, 800 aircraft, 800 bases, 11 aircraft carriers, 800 bases in 70 countries. This mighty USA, its industrial complex is 5 to 6 times weaker than. Now, Hamara jo Atmanirbharta in defense, it is a huge change from the past. We were just discussing DRDO, DPSUs. I'm quoting the Prime Minister who says that Atmanirbharta in defense must become the fulcrum of innovation, energy, and enterprise. He's referring to private sector and startups. And he's so right. The next phase of defense capacities will come from private sector and startups. If we are to see the evidence on ground in Ukraine, where what startups like, Helsing have done, what Elon Musk SpaceX is doing, Today, it is SpaceX, then Boeing Lockheed, and then DARPA and NASA. Because these DPSUs or government organizations are not agile, fleet-footed as the startups are. तो हमने जो startups की शुरुआत की है, if you see IDEX carefully, it has done produce wonderful results. We have startups like New Space, 114 AI, Third Eye Tech, Agnikul, Pixel, Dhruv Space, which are getting orders from the globe. Up, we have to use these startups to, leverage these emerging technologies, convert them into combat effects like precisionary, like its space, and take them to the fleets and formations, to the squadron company fight. So what did you, when you said, what is the opportunity? This is the opportunity. We have to quickly use our startups to do this. And if we do that in an asymmetric manner, the Chinese threat can be neutralized to an extent. We also need cultural transitions. What the West does now, whenever their needs, combat needs, are in conflict with, say, procedure and GFR, they write up a paper, take waivers for what they call national security exceptions. Ki har jagah chalega, not in national security. We are not doing it in our case. Startups and the private sector will not deliver with this industrialized version of the DPP. This is for industrial capacities. The way digital capacities are moving and changing, you need an entirely new DPP. अभी आप देखिए यूक्रेन में क्या हो रहा है. You find trench warfare, वो एक squadron company fights, blood and gore. Cold War legacy era instruments, tank, artillery, ये दोनों तो हैं ही, but they are being taken, combat from them is being taken to a new high because of bleeding edge technologies. Bleeding edge technologies, जैसे AI, military autonomy, drones. तो ये सब, if World War II was about steel and aluminium or steel and iron, the current war is about ships. Russia would not have been back in the game if they had not got ships from China. Ships are going into your drones and into your hypersonic missiles. Our Atmanirbharta in defense is now, it's, started reforming when it comes to industrial capacities. It now needs to acquire a digital tenor through startups. So all, these changes are there. Now, if we don't make these cultural transitions, we don't get a DPP, these effects will not be taken to the squadron company fight. So if you ask me what is that in one word, what is the challenge before us? It is change. Change, culturally, structurally. These are the issues that have to be tackled. So this was as far as the industrial capacities is concerned.
A cultural change, I think it's something that is needs a political movement. It needs a revolution. So basically, revolution is very hard to engineer, and once it starts, it's hard to control also. Like China's cultural revolution, and then Japanese.
No, I'm not talking of those revolutions. Cultural, I mean, what are your, cultural work ethics in, say, Atmanirbharta and defense? Your DPP ko badli karna.
Those are reforms, but
reforms.
that too, I think it will be
procedural reforms, you may call them that.
Yes, it will be very difficult.
Also, why I say culture is, देखिए जो हमारा पूरा कल्चर था कि अच्छा हमको ये टैंक चाहिए, DRDO को हमने GSQR दे दिया, वो बनाएगा. अब ये नहीं चल रहा है. Commercial technologies off the shelf are far ahead. The GSQR is dead. We have to understand these changes. अब उसको आप जो भी नाम दे दें, procedural change, वो कल्चर बदली होना है कि भाई हमने बोल दिया टेक्नोलॉजी DRDO बनाएगा, जब वो बनाएगा तो हम लड़ेंगे. It has to be all together. That is what I was trying to say by culture.
One area where India is facing some problem is the area of border infrastructure. In that, a lot of investments have been made in the last, after the coming of the Modi government. Before that, we were not investing significantly in the border villages. So border villages were becoming alienated. The people were migrating from there. Now the government has tried to make some changes over there. So, but we still are, I think, far behind China, the kind of development that has happened in the border villages on the Chinese side. Is that right?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. See, we have to understand the Chinese. There is a bit, he's a British war theorist Clausewitz. He says, trickery, deception, these are weapons of the weak. जो Chinese philosopher है Sun Tzu, he says they are weapons of choice. तो जब चाइना बॉर्डर विलेज बना रहा था, वो क्या कर रहा था? बॉर्डर विलेज के बहाने he is creating capacities which the military can occupy during war. हम उल्टा ही कर रहे थे. We said if we connect our border with roads, the Chinese will use the roads to attack us. I mean, look at
that's the kind of thinking we had.
Yeah, absolute innocence, bholapan. Now you're right, it has changed. We are building those villages, roads are coming up, tunnels are coming up. We never had this big thinking. When I was a colonel and all, if you said we want those tunnels that the Chinese are making, they would say, what are you talking? Today, with the kind of precision attacks that are taking place, ammunition is being put in underground silos. Ukraine Yudh mein, these HIMARS that the Americans used in the initial phases, they took out 40 ammunition dumps of the Russians. उनके पास ammunition नहीं बचा था. They ran to the begging to North Korea for ammunition. So infra not only by way of communications, access, border villages, but by hardening to absorb these missile strikes. So you are absolutely right that we were pretty far behind. Now things have started. We are better than before, but when it comes to the Chinese rocket force, look at their penetration, look at their precision. We need not only that, we need massive AD protection. So all these, ammunition dumps, logistics installations, troop deployments in front, they will need not only infra, but AD protection. So it is not just infra. Our whole defense posture needs to be strict. It is happening, but no matter what you do, it will take time. So that is the reality of our infra.
India had traditionally been quite close to Russia. Now, in the last 10 years, we have made some alliances with the US also. But Russia is also become very close to now China. And China is supporting Pakistan. So the geopolitics has become very complicated in Asia. If China and Russia continue to come closer, then Russia might be forced to support Pakistan also in certain geopolitical situations. Organizations like UN or elsewhere, they can be pressurized. So how does India deal with this complication?
You see, there are two broad geopolitical trends. One is, if you recall, in 1990, Clinton said, President Bill Clinton, that, it's the economy, stupid. Matlab, at the end of the day, it's only the economy that matters. Economy still matters, but of late, if you see, it is national security, stupid. National security, or let me say that national security and technology are driving geopolitics like never before. So this is the first thing we have to take note. The other thing, as you pointed out, a contest is now brewing between a crumbling old order, USA-led West. USA is losing its hegemony. It may still be retaining supremacy. And this new axis which you spoke of, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, CRIC. And they are coordinating wonderfully across theaters. So India now needs to revisit its strategic autonomy in these terms. The fact remains that Russia has remained a time-tested friend. As far as, our dependence on them, it's still for spares in all aggregate terms. Army is 60%, I'm told Air Force is 70%, Navy is between 75 to 80. That is the reality. You also see when we talk of strategic autonomy, after all, in 62, at the end of the day, Prime Minister Nehru ended up writing a letter to President Kennedy, begging for equipment. 71, what secured us against the Americans was the Indo-Soviet Treaty. So we have to take a careful look at it. I would say that we cannot afford to abandon the Russians. We can see how we can use the Russians as a counterweight to China, if at all that is possible. That I'll leave to our diplomats. But we have no choice but to nurse the US relationship in terms of technology. Especially bleeding edge technologies are not coming from Russia. So I would say there is the traditional Russian relationship. The American relationship can be spectacular in terms of technology. If we leverage ISET, those critical emerging technologies, Indus X, which allows innovation to flow. So an Indian startup in collaboration with the American corporate major can help, say, develop chips. Now this is being further, it will be aided by the SOSA agreement, which was signed when the Honorable Raksha Mantri just last week went to USA. So our ties between the two defense ecosystems of India and USA can be strengthened further. But we must realize at the end of the day, nobody will come to our aid. It has to be our blood, our treasure, American technology. What I will urge the Americans to realize is that an technologically enabled India or Indian military is in your self-interest. So they should not put too many caveats, ki ye kar lo, wo kar lo. We will not do any alliance. Alliance means treaty obligations, this, that. Those kind of insistence should not be there. And if India and USA come together, even in technological terms, I mean, we'll open up. China could be faced with a two-front threat. One from that side, Taiwan, one here. So these things cannot be debated in public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anoop. Thank you
Very
very
nice
much.
talking to you.